Welcome to the Industry Angel Podcast. We hear from the best business minds across the globe. Entrepreneurs, social influencers, marketing mavens, and sales rock stars. We've got them all. Here comes your weekly dose of inspiration with your host, Ian Farah.
Welcome to episode 116 of the Industry Angel. Today we have a returning guest who spilled the beans he was coming back on the show via LinkedIn. And then quite a few people listened or re-listened to his first episode. And Yorkshireman Evan Thomas enjoyed Simon's episode on... Oh, I've just give the guest away, haven't I? Forget that, I never said that. Evan enjoyed on his commute around Norwich the first episode this guest has recorded. Thanks for the kind words, Evan. Kate Anderson and Simon Raybould got in touch after last week's episode. Remember where we discussed feedback? Glad to hear you both shared the love by giving compliments. And I took my own medicine. I left an iTunes review this week for a podcast that I've listened to for ages. I then actually took a screenshot, sent it via Facebook Messenger to the host, and he was well chuffed. So you know what to do. Katie Stidolf has been going through the back catalogue and enjoyed episode 12. Wow, that seems so long ago. With Sharon MacArthur, where we asked, what kind of leader are you? We've had so much content, haven't we, in this last few years? I've noticed there are lots of listeners going back to the catalogue, actually. Maybe when they find the show, maybe the start at the beginning, I don't know, but I love that. Regular listener Nolan listened to the last show of the year. Remember, I gave you a challenge to create some content, to get stuff done, get yourself out there. Well, Nolan has created a fantastic video of his camper vans that he rents out. So well done, Nolan. Keep sharing. Thanks for the tag. Okay, then, let's hear from today's not-so-mystery guest. Today we have a returning guest, a brand-building specialist, fashion and British manufacturing entrepreneur, author and speaker. Welcome back to the Industry Angel, Simon Middleton.
Hello, Ian, and thanks for having me back.
Well, it's great to have you back with us, Simon, because I really enjoyed our last episode, which was episode 55. And we spoke predominantly about brands, a lot about clothing brands, actually. I've just listened back to it, and it was a really good episode, and it was very popular, actually.
That's nice to know.
Well, I'll tell you what, just remind our listeners, you've appeared on CNN, Bloomberg, Sky, 5, BBC, but of course, the highlight of your career was 18 months ago on this show.
Absolutely
and
was.
I was checking back this morning on the stats just out of interest. And man, the countries like Monaco to Montenegro, Italy to India, Croatia to Colombia, they all heard your dulcet tones, my friend. So I'm pretty sure we're going to heat the world back up again today with Volume 2.
Excellent. I can't believe it's that long ago, actually. So it was the summer before last, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So there's no pressure.
No, none at all. I don't feel any.
So
it's all been downhill in the last 18 months, mind you. So
I bet it hasn't. Because the last time we spoke, you talked about your book, Build a Brand in 30 Days. I think that was what we're really focusing on.
Yeah.
But 18 months' time, things have changed. What's going on? I'm just going to bat this straight at you. What you been up to?
Okay. Well, in the last... I suppose there's 3 or 4 significant things. One is that I started a new clothing brand. I can't remember whether we talked about it 18 months ago or not. A clothing brand called Blackshore. Did we discuss that?
You talked about Shackleton.
Okay. Well, there's a new one since then, which I'm very happy to talk about and bring you up to speed on because there's an interesting brand journey there. I've just begun work on a new book with a slightly provocative title, which I'd love to tell you about. And I've been on a sort of personal journey in those 18 months because I also can't remember whether I told you that when we last spoke 18 months ago, I wasn't very well. I don't know if we referred to that, but I may have been rather cautious about talking about that then, but I'm happy to talk about it now because I think it needs talking about. And basically I had some mental and emotional health problems, and the it was a very interesting journey. And one of the things I learned from it was that sometimes you just have to stop working and do other things. So I did. It's been an action-packed 18 months, but it's also been an 18 months in which I've spent a lot of time, frankly, not doing very much that you'd expect an entrepreneur or a writer to do. I've done a lot of walking. I've done a lot of thinking. And I've done a lot of healing. And I'm sort of back in action officially from right now, really, from the beginning of this year, thanks to a number of significant things that help me to get well again. And I think those things probably do need talking about, because a lot of particularly entrepreneurial people and writers and speakers feel obliged to give out this image of a sort of, that they're impregnable, that they're somehow, have superpowers, but actually that isn't true. Entrepreneurs suffer just as much as anybody else. And I think it's about time that people started admitting that. And that, thankfully, there is a trend for people to say, yeah, I've had some tough moments too. So anyway, there we are.
Listen, I'm really glad you've rose that. It is a really important topic. Listeners will know I've rose that topic quite a lot. I've suffered with burnouts, and I won't bore all the listeners again with it because they know my story. You just got to Google it. But just for you, Simon, I had 7 months out.
Uh-huh.
I got out of a company, really hard time, went through acquisition, really, really, really awful, stressful time. And it took me 7 months to get my mojo back. And there was no catalyst. It was a bit like yourself, just healing, running, riding, clearing out the loft, mowing lawns, nothing. Just, just thinking time and just downtime. And then a couple of weeks, I really started to get my mojo back and what am I going to do? And, there was no real epiphany moment. It was just, I was ready to go again.
Yeah, I think that's right. I couldn't put it down to a single moment, the heal, because it's a healing process. It's a bit like a scar over a wound.
Yeah.
And, you go for the first period of time where you want to pick at it. And eventually then you realize if you keep picking at it, it's not going to get better. And so you have to sort of look forward and focus, but also to become, I'm a terrible one for being very hard on myself. I kind of judge myself very harshly. And I've learned with the benefit of friends and particularly my fiance. I'm getting married in June this year, and
awesome.
That's a new relationship, and it all came about accidentally, and it brought me out of my depression over a long period, over a three-year period, and the support from the person I'm going to marry has been unbelievably important in the healing and helping me to look forwards and to enjoy the present moment. But sometimes one of the things that interests me about all of this is that it's the apparent downtime, the apparent time when you're not really doing anything. In my case, I spent an awful lot of time walking on the marshes. I live on the coast in Suffolk, and I am able to sort of walk out of my back door and be in open marshland in about 5 minutes and down onto a fantastic beach and coastline in about 10 minutes. And walking there in any weather, on the one hand, it's incredibly healing, but on the other hand, it's also a place where dreams are dreamt and ideas are spun. So down there, I conceived of a new clothing brand, which I'll tell you a little bit about, but it also prompted me the ideas behind the new book that I'm now working on, and it prompted me to finally decide to get back into consultancy, which I'd more or less abandoned for a couple of years. But you need time, and you need rest. I think that's what it was, rest, in order to come back.
Yep, totally agree. I'm really glad you've shared that, because deep thinkers, creative types. Simon, you're an author. You've started brands. You've consulted and stuff. You're a creative man. You're obviously a bright guy. Things that will impact you. So good things, highs will really make you high, but lows will really take you low. I've found, and that's just the blessing and the curse of the mind that we have.
Yes, I think
But
that's right.
That's just the way it is.
I've learned to manage it. Actually, what I was suffering from was depression, and it was when it was acute. It was very acute, and it hasn't gone away. I don't think it ever truly goes away. And
I understand.
It's but what you learn to do, if you're lucky, which I have been, is to learn to manage it. So I can see it coming. You know that thing that Churchill used to call it the black dog, I can see it out of the corner of my eye now in a way. But it's taken me 3 years to learn to see it before it hits me. So it used to sneak up on me and kind of bite me on the arse without me realizing and pin me to the floor for a week. But now I can see it, metaphorically speaking, I can sort of glance out of the corner of my eye and think, oh, yeah, there you go. I can see you. And what I do then is one of two things. Either I dive into work really hard, or I say, I'm having the day off and I go and do something that's fun, or or I just walk or I row. One of my saving graces is I've never been very sporting, but I love movies. Now those things are not necessarily connected, but what I've discovered is that a rowing machine and a good movie is a great way to beat the black dog, because if all you're doing is watching a movie and rowing yourself to a standstill for an hour, the black dog runs away, and at least for the rest of that day, and it's a wonderful thing. Everything, your physiology changes, your body chemistry changes in that process, and of course your mood changes too. So that's anyway. There we go.
Yeah, no, you did right. Exercise for me, and again, I've said this on the show many times. If I don't run on these hills behind my house here, I go stir crazy. And actually, sometimes I do go stir crazy. And what I do is a bit like your dog. I actually I run away. So last February, I spent 9 days in India, and I ran away. I just needed to heal, and I just needed to get the sun on my back, forget it all, and realize who I was again, and just feel I don't know, just get our feeling back again. But
I think we all need it.
It's great. And it's great that you can see it coming as well. And I think you got to listen to your gut, listen to your head, and if any listeners, but we're going to take something out of this. If you do feel like you're really struggling, I think that perfect thing of what you said there is a day off is not going to break the bank.
No, that's right. And my attitude to work, I'm so delighted to be back on firing on all cylinders, but I'm also intrinsically, this might sound surprising, but I'm intrinsically quite a lazy person. So, but I've learned to sort of treasure that aspect of myself in a way. I used to be slightly ashamed of the fact that I was a bit lazy, but I worked extra hard to compensate. But now I'm only doing the projects that I really want to do, and
that's the way to do it.
It does make a big difference. It really does. I mean, I suppose I have the luxury of doing that in the sense that I've just turned 60, and my sort of financial pressures on me are lower than they were when my children were young, etc. So I can afford perhaps to do that, which I know is very difficult for a lot of people. But what I've come to realize and treasure over the last 3 years is that time to do whatever you like with is unbelievably precious. And that's, it took me a long time to learn that lesson, really.
Yeah, it's funny. I was a guest on someone's show yesterday, actually, and what I said was, when you're on your deathbed looking back, you'll never say to yourself, "Man, I wish I'd done 2 or 3 more than business meetings."
No, absolutely not. That's entirely right. Yeah, so nobody wishes they'd spent another day at work. But nevertheless, the sort of corollary of that is that I don't intend to stop. I don't really believe in retirement, so that I see no reason to stop working, creating, hustling, doing those things until the day I die. So I'm not looking forward like some people, like the traditional, my father, for example, looked forward to the moment when he didn't have to go to work at all, so he could just do his own stuff. I don't see that. I don't view it that way. But what I do want to do is protect the time to do my own stuff here and now. So,
See, you're not a lazy bugger.
oh, I am.
So listen, what I want to get into is your controversially titled fourth brand-related book. Would you like to tell us about that?
Yes, it is. Well, it's controversially titled. It'll only be controversial if people read it, of course. If everyone ignores it, then there's no controversy. But it's called Brand is Dead. And the title, I've sometimes wondered whether the title people might attack it and just say, oh, that's just clickbait. It's deliberately provocative. It is deliberately provocative, but I don't think it's clickbait because I think it's fundamentally true that something has changed in brand and branding in the last decade, but it's only really in the last 2 years probably that people have finally realised what's changing and what's changed. So that's what the book is about. So it sort of tries to lay out what I think has changed, and then it will, when I've written it, I haven't written it yet, it will it will then try and articulate ways in which entrepreneurs and brands, if you like, could alter their behaviour to adapt to that change. And the fundamental message, the subtitle of the book, if you like, is it's what you do that counts. And the message behind that is traditionally advertising, marketing, and then the sort of more sophisticated strategic notion of branding, which I'm part of, was really all about how you present yourself to the world. And my take on branding, as you've heard me talk before, is that branding is really the creation of meaning. But we used to talk for a number of years about brand storytelling, brand narrative, getting close to our customers through sort of telling them great stories and involving them, all of that stuff. I don't think that's enough anymore. I don't think it's wrong. It's just not enough. Now I think what it's about, what's fundamentally changed, is that we are now in an era of zero trust. Brand storytelling works as long as you trust the person that's telling you the story. But nobody trusts anybody anymore, sadly. And I think it's now brands have to behave in a certain way rather than... So it's not about what they say, it's about what they are actually seen to do. And the thing that the technology that has made that an imperative is obviously the internet. That's the technology, because everybody can find everything out. So that's the technology. But the sort of environment behind it is, I think, two things. One is millennials and the children of millennials. And the other one is the political, economic, environmental aspects of the world. This sort of swing towards populism and the new right and nationalism and so on, coupled with, at the other end of the spectrum perhaps, a more globalist environmental concern, just massive changes in the way our expectations about the world and what it meant to be in has changed. And therefore, it's no good anymore just for a brand to say, here's an interesting story about us and why you should like us. It just won't wash anymore. Sounds rather doom-ridden, doesn't it? But it's...
No. It's that interesting. I'm really glad you brought this up because I'd like a bit of advice on this myself. So I do a lot of social media training, digital training, and basically what I talk about there is relationships.
Yeah.
And, I would call myself a sales professional. I've been in the business a couple of decades in sales. And I start my talks off with a slide that basically talks about if you create relationships, sales will just take care of itself. And I'm a big fan of relationships, and I feel digitally and socially, and from a social media point of view, we need to show ourselves. And I know it's getting a bit cliche now. We talk about being the authentic you and being human, but I think that's what gets the trust across. I love the storytelling bit. There is a place for it, but I like to see the people behind the brands. I don't like to see a kind of faceless logo. I love to see the people behind it. For instance, we all know Gary V
Yes.
and the collaboration he did with K-Swiss. What I liked about K-Swiss was the president, Barney, a fellow Brit. Barney is doing a lot of YouTube stuff now, interviewing entrepreneurs. He's the brand, he's the president, but he's getting out there. I mean, I'm going off at a bit of a tangent here, but if you think about the Mike Ashleys of the world, who own Newcastle United up in my neck of the woods here, he's getting a really bad rap now, even down in Westminster, for this sort of real hard-nosed business face without this kind of authenticity behind it. It just seems very transactional. So again, just circling back to my statement was, I love to see when people share stuff and show themselves and their feelings. Am I right here? What's your opinions on that?
Yeah, well, of course you're right. Yes, absolutely. I think what I'm getting at is something as well as that, a bit more, which is that it's relationships are great. But I'll give you an example. And this is the killer thing. Why we're talking, purely commercially in terms of branding. Okay, let's for the moment.
Okay.
One of the reasons is that I'm a big believer in brands. I love brands. I find them fascinating. I buy into their story. My favourite brick and mortar store to go shopping in is John Lewis, and the reason for that is I just sort of buy into the whole John Lewis brand. It fits with who I think I am, which is part of branding. So, I think people like me shop in shops like John Lewis. That's kind of, it just suits me somehow. Okay. But if I want to buy a thing, a commodity, I don't give a damn about John Lewis. So I'm sitting now in front of this microphone. Okay. Now, to give them credit, this is a microphone I bought because I wanted to sort of try a bit of podcasty type stuff. I'm not very good at it, so don't worry about that. But the microphone I bought, I'm just reading off the side now. It's called a Snowball Ice. Okay. Now, I'd never heard of that. Never heard of Snowball. I didn't know anything about podcast mics. What did I do to find out a cheap podcast mic? I Googled. Okay. Now, you might say, well, that's a brand. Well, it is and it isn't. It just so happens to be the dominant tool. But, if another one comes along that works better than Google, I'll use that. I don't give a damn about Google. And once I read a little bit about what my options were, where did I go? I went to Amazon. Now, I didn't go to Amazon because it's a brand. I went to Amazon because it provides me with just massive amount of convenience. It's easy. And I actually wasn't chasing a branded product. If Amazon had offered me a white label mic that did the same thing and was a bit cheaper, I'd have bought that. I couldn't care less. And that's the whole point, really, is that brands are great if you care about the thing or the transaction, or you want trust, or you want a name that you know. But if you're just buying stuff, and it could be technology, it could be, toilet roll, or anything in between, brands don't really matter two hoots. So, and even more so than that, this, voice technology, things like Alexa and so on, you have one of those on the table. I could have just said to Alexa, find me a microphone to plug into my computer. I don't want to spend more than £50. And Alexa would have come back and said, here are the top three. And I'd have go, yeah, buy that one. And if I'd had my account set up all right, it would have bought it for me without me taking any interest at all in the brands. And that's one of the reasons that brand is dead. The other reason is that brands tell lies all the time. And millennials in particular, and their children, and their children, they don't trust them. They want to. There's a lot of research that says millennials really want to trust brands, but they don't. So brands have to work really hard to win them over. And it's not about storytelling. It's not even about the CEO doing podcasts. Millennials and their children see right through that. They just don't buy into it. So it sounds rather depressing. But
what's the answer, Simon? What's the answer? How can we get this trust across then?
The answer,
what do we do?
The answer is that you have. It's not about what you say; it's about what you do. So, if the brands want to win trust and to be remembered, they have to do different things. Now, I don't know what those things are specifically, but I'll give you an example. Just before Christmas, Ted Baker, the brand Ted Baker, very popular with young people in particular. Not just Ted Baker clothes, but Ted Baker cosmetics, Ted Baker bath products, all that stuff. Great Christmas presents for young people and so on. You get them in big boxes. Then this story came out about the CEO of Ted Baker and his so-called enforced hugging and his perhaps arguably, allegedly inappropriate behaviour around some members of staff. And lots of people came forward and, questioned. Now, that story's sort of gone a bit quiet. I don't know quite what's happening there. But that immediately shakes the trust in that brand. And that's a brand that is massively successful among millennials. But they're going to remember, it may not have affected Christmas sales because, everything was in a big box and half price, etc. And it was probably their parents buying them for them, as opposed to the millennials buying it themselves. But that's going to affect how they think long term about that brand. Do you want to buy stuff from a over huggy baby boomer kind of slightly, iffy kind of guy? I don't know whether you do. And it's very difficult to see through the eyes of much younger people. But when I talk to them, they don't really trust all of this stuff. They don't trust, those old brands. And they're looking for something else. They're looking for meaning, but a different kind of meaning from the meaning I talked about in Build a Brand in 30 Days, which was about the brand creating meaning, telling great stories, etc. They're now looking for, how does this brand actually make a positive contribution to the world? Or at the very least, where is the evidence that this brand isn't damaging my world and my future? That's the very least they want now. So that's what I mean by behaviour.
That's interesting. I think millennials, and I've seen studies on this, they much prefer to spend their money on experiences over material goods. Do you think that there's some of the brands that they buy, is it possible to make that an experience? And I'm not sure how you do that. Maybe it's personalization. So, for instance, if you were buying a pair of trainers, could you personalize them? Could you make that the experience?
Yes, personalization is a thing, but in a way, it's a tactic. That's a sales tactic.
Okay.
I'm not saying, of course, that overnight branding died and something new came in its place. Absolutely not. That's not what the book is about. And it's a transitional period, but you only have to look at the sales figures of all of the big legacy brands. They are all in decline. There's no getting away from it. They are all in decline. Take Gillette. Gillette have done that very interesting TV commercial recently about the sort of good men. Is that the best a man can get? Kind of questioning men's behaviour, etc., which had been highly controversial for lots of different sort of nuanced ways of critiquing it. I don't think it's a particularly good commercial, but I absolutely don't think it's what people have said it is. Some people have been saying, it's sexist, in the sense that it's sexist against men. Other people have called it racist because the good guys in it are the non-white guys. So but that kind of stuff, that's just the right wing. That's just the nasty right-wing nonsense that is starting to creep up in our society, unfortunately. So all of that is crap, of course. I think it's questionable as just a piece of commercial making. I don't think it's especially good. But what's interesting to me about it is that Gillette's in decline. Certainly in that, its sales figures are gradually going down, and it's got to do something other than say we make this. Our razor has now got 3 blades or 4 blades or 5 blades or 6 blades, and it can cut even smoother. And beautiful women will stroke your cheek even more affectionately when you use. They've got to, it's time for something new. So they've come out and said, we are now about good men who behave well around women, who behave well around each other, who, et cetera, et cetera. Well, that's lovely. That's great. I applaud them for that to a point, but it ain't going to make any difference to a 20-year-old. They don't give a damn. In fact, they're going to be buying either the cheapest effective product they can get, or they're going to be attracted to a new brand that speaks to them directly, that isn't part of that old generation. So there are, in the shaving category, a number of new, cooler, cheaper in some cases, more environmentally friendly, hipper kind of brands coming up. And they're robbing Gillette blind because they are speaking directly to a new generation. Now, it's true they're creating brands, but they're not doing it in the old-fashioned way. They're doing it by somehow creating a different kind of meaning that's often to do with their behaviour and the communities they create rather than just talking.
Yeah, I think communities is a key word. So I was talking about experience before, so customer experience, customer service, things like those are some of the things that I've saw are really impacting a brand, both positive and negative. So what I've saw a little bit of the larger brands, I've saw a bit of a decline in customer service, and I don't know why. I don't know if they are getting squeezed. So
They are.
sales comes down.
Yeah.
What do you do? Do you nip the customer service end to try and be more profitable?
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's what's happening, but
I think that's exactly what's happening. Yeah, exactly.
I've noticed there's a squeeze there, but on the smaller brands, as you say, who are trying to create a community and experience, they're extending that experience, which then is, like you say, the millennials of the world are going to be much more highly attracted to that brand because they've got some affiliation with it.
Yeah. This is. I feel slightly embarrassed about this. I'm a 60-year-old, silver-haired, kind of old, grizzled brand person talking about what millennials think. Now, I've got no right to do that, really. I don't know what millennials think apart from what I read about what they think and when I talk to my own children. So I don't want to be doing that, but what I am absolutely confident about saying is that the old guard is finished. The writing is not just on the wall; it's online, it's everywhere. They have to learn to behave differently. The great big conglomerates that own people like Gillette, P&G, for example, who own Gillette. God, it must be painful being in their boardrooms. Because I don't think there's any good news for them. Because we don't need them. That's the sad thing. I have nothing against those companies. Why would I? They provide employment, etc. They fuel the economy, but they've got to change their behaviour. Now, I don't have magic answers to that, obviously, but all I can observe is that it's changing, and it's changing so fast. As I say, to recap, we'll move on to something else perhaps, but to recap, I'm a lover of brands, but when I'm buying commoditized products, I really don't give a damn what the brand is. I'll just go to what they call a concierge, which is, Amazon is a concierge. That's how it's changing.
I don't really want to go here, but I'm going to. We're talking about Amazon there, and you mentioned John Lewis earlier on. Then let's just talk about the high street for a couple of minutes.
Yeah.
What's going on?
Well, God, it's complicated, isn't it? The high street. I think the mistakes were made 20 years ago, but you can't, in a sense, you can forgive some of the mistakes that were made. And what I mean by that is, first of all, the building of massive shopping centres, malls, cathedrals of shopping, which are now gradually emptying. Now, a futurist might have said 20 years ago, and some people did, this, you're heading in the wrong direction here. It's not going there. It's going online. But, you can walk into a shopping mall. There's a massive one in Norwich called Chapelfield. Norwich is my sort of nearest big city. And you can walk around there on a Saturday and think that the world is absolutely fine. But the flagship store at the end of the mall is 4 stories tall, dominates the whole thing, and it's House of Fraser. Now, so it all looks good at the moment, but so did the Titanic just before it hit the iceberg. It was all glittering lights. Of course, it won't be very long before that House of Fraser store is gone, unless that happens to be one of the handful that they're going to say. But to the best of my knowledge, that one's going. When that goes, what is this massive cathedral of shopping going to be like? It's going to be like a cathedral with no altar. It's the heart will be ripped out of it, and the high street is in massive trouble. They can't afford to pay the big rents for the big spaces. The only people that are surviving on the high street and thriving, in fact, apparently, are small independent coffee shops barbershops, nail bars, and a handful of other small independent sort of vaping shops, those sorts of things. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The things that can be set up quickly with very low spend, and notably independent. They're not big brands. They're just providing a service. And so they're the ones that are growing on the high street. But that's not sustainable. I think the high street has got to go through another decade of massive pain before it starts to get better. And I'm not a futurist. I don't know what the outcome will be, but I know that there is no going back. It will never be how it was in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and even the 2000s. It's just impossible. It's never going back. I'll name them. I use LinkedIn, as people like me do.
Okay.
Although I have lots of irritations with LinkedIn, but that's another story. But I use it, and it pops up job offers, or not offers, but job possibilities. And one that keeps coming up, and I can't quite figure out why. It says potential job match, and there's a little picture of me, and it says, House of Fraser are hiring. You might be interested. Click through. And I think, really? how insane would you have to be to place your bet on that as a career choice? Because it ain't going to last, regardless of what millionaire comes in and saves it temporarily. It's not going to last.
No, well, I admire honesty on this one. So let me take you to something here. Then, would I be mad to launch a brand now, whether that be clothing, I don't know, some craft goods, a specialist watch brand, whatever it was? Would I be mad?
No, not at all.
Okay.
And that might sound like a contradiction to what I've just said. I think what you'd have to do, assuming you could have, find the money to do it, you have to obey the new rules, which, if you want to sell it online, then you have to find some way of driving people to your website. Don't do it through Amazon, because, they'll kill you in a variety of ways. You can't.
A nice statement.
Well, they will, because whilst it might be a quick way to get your sales initially and to get, you've kind of abdicated anything to do with your brand, because you're just another commodity then to them.
Okay.
So you've got to find some way of driving people to your website if you want to do it online, and you have to give people a reason. And a reason it can't be just, our brand is cool, our brand's lovely. It's got to be something else. But also, if you wanted to open it on the high street, as it were, that's perfectly possible as well. But you need to pick your place carefully. You need to don't tie yourself into long-term leases. You need to be very light on your feet. And most of all, you need to provide a product and a service that is high. This goes back to the old brand rules. Now more than ever, you have to be highly distinctive. You have to be utterly compelling emotion. There's got to be some very powerful reason for people to buy from you. It can't be just because you say it's nice or it's interesting. It's got to be much more powerful than that. When
I buy something, I want to know if it's making a change. And I just thought about Kiva. So I don't know if you're up to speed on Kiva. It's a sort of
I'm not.
Well, it's a microfinancing site. So basically, you loan somebody in Kenya $25 towards them buying a dairy cow, for instance.
Oh, okay. Yes, I'm familiar with the concept, yeah.
Yeah, it's such fun. And on Industry Angel here, we've got a group of about 19 of us, and we all chipped in, and we bought a couple of cows and a bit of grain and it's some equipment, and it's a loan, you get it back, but it just feels nice that you're doing something.
Yeah.
Now, I know someone like Tom's, for instance, tried that, but isn't that just a sales thing? Like literally we're paying for those extra pair of trainers that they give to somebody. You buy a pair of Toms and they give a pair of trainers to someone.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I think that's how it worked. But
I've got mixed feelings about that, to be honest.
Me too. We're just paying for it. It's pretty transparent.
I'll tell you what my mixed feelings are, though, is that it could be absolutely sincere, and I'm not criticising the Tom's approach at all, because I don't know enough about it. It would be wrong of me to do that. But I think there's a number of questions around it. Like, could I just buy the trainers, please, and I'll do whatever charitable giving I want to give separately? It might be that, I don't know in what circumstances their product is made. Is it made in a place that pays proper wages, et cetera, et cetera? So lots of questions around that. If, however, all of those questions are answered satisfactorily, then I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I absolutely wouldn't say. It's not for me to judge whether something's wrong. I just think that there's a danger that it might be a tactic rather than really woven in to the brand itself.
Yeah.
So I'll give you an example. With I've started this new clothing brand, and my clothing brand has problems as well, and I'm very happy to talk about them because entrepreneurs might be interested. But it's called Blackshore, and it's a men's casual wear brand inspired by sort of fishermen's workwear. Basically, it's inspired by wandering up and down the harbour of Southwold, where I live, and part of that harbour is called the Blackshore. So it's casual wear, and it's basically, it's jackets, it's trousers, it's knitwear, it's a couple of sort of overcoat type pieces, like parka type pieces and so on, and some shirting and so on. It has two things at its heart. It's the heart of its sort of ethos. One is that it's only manufactured in Britain, in British factories, and there's some reasons around that. But it's more of an ethical stance than anything else, frankly, because it makes life very difficult for us. It's because it's expensive and it's so on. But it's a stance that we decided to take from the beginning. But it also has a direct, if people aren't prepared to pay extra for that and they're not interested, then we know they're not our customers. So very happy with that. The other thing we've done is to offer a lifetime repair guarantee. Now, what that means is that if you buy a Blackshore jacket and you wear it for 10 years, and it gets holes in the elbows, let's say, you can send it back and we'll patch it. And we won't hide it. It's called a lifetime visible repair guarantee. It just means that we'll continue to make it functional for you, and you'll wear that elbow patch as a kind of battle scar.
Yeah.
Now, there's a nice brand story there in the sense that you can show your friends in the pub, look, I've had this for 10 years. I sent it back to them. They repaired it. And here's the patch to prove it.
All right, okay.
But it's also an ethical thing because whilst we were, obviously it's a business, we want people to buy stuff from us. What we don't want is for them to throw it away. We want them to carry on using it. We want it to have a life because clothing does have an end point when it's unwearable, but far too much clothing is just scrapped and thrown away. And we think that's a shame. And so there's a sort of environmental position there about it.
Yeah.
Now, I think that has an appeal. And it seems to, people have shown an interest in it. As an entrepreneur, though, the challenge is that we have yet to raise the money to go into production. So I managed to find an old friend of mine who invested in the business in order to get us from the design stage, the sampling stage, to allow me to spend several months sort of developing relationships with factories and so on and building our team. But what we haven't managed to do is to convince the right investor to go, yep, I'll put £500,000 in that and you can go into production and we'll have a full flying business. Now, I think there's a number of reasons for that. One is that I can't prove to them that it's going to be successful. Brexit has thrown everything into disarray. Nobody knows what's happening. So it was a bad time to launch it. And the high street seems to be dying on its arse. So people are very cautious about anything that smacks of clothing retail. So when you said, would it be would you be daft to start a brand? No, I don't think so. But you also have to realise that it's a difficult time to start a brand. And my experience is testament to that. Somebody asked me the other day, has Blackshore failed? And I said, no. Blackshore hasn't failed. It just hasn't succeeded yet. That's the thing. It's kind of, it's gone on the first part of the journey. The next part of the journey is to put the fuel in the tank to take off. And that bit, at some point, someone will phone me up and say, yeah, I really love this. I've read the business plan. I've read everything else. I'm willing to take a punt on it. We just haven't found that person yet.
Just going back to the sort of very initial stages of Blackshore, and it was, you're inspired by, I think you said the kind of the marine, was it the sailing, the
sailing, the harbour, the people working there, just that sort of stuff.
So super cool. I get that. Did you also then just sit down and think, what are the values that I want to create of a business? What, when you talk about being ethical there and did you sit down and think about that, or did it just come naturally?
It is in two parts. I mean, those two core bits. The first bit about being made in Britain, I was already committed to that.
Okay.
For the simple reason that I'd had that experience with Shackleton. That was a made in Britain brand and remains so. I sold Shackleton, and when I was unwell, I sort of got out of it, sold my shares, moved on, so on. So, but to the best of my knowledge, that continues to thrive and is, doing nicely. And their new collection of stuff is fabulous. But I have no commercial interest in it at all. But I did believe in the Made in Britain, and I'd met people at factories and so on during that process, and I wanted to keep that. Also because I've got no great desire personally to go flying off and touring Chinese factories and trying to make judgments about whether they're good, bad, or indifferent when I really don't have the expertise to do that. So the Made in Britain thing was easy. The lifetime visible repair guarantee was slightly more difficult because I had bought into this concept of long-lasting clothing because I'd spoken to a number of people in the industry who believed in that sort of thing passionately and in the sort of opposite of fast throwaway fashion. But that was a more considered decision. It was something we thought about a lot, and a lot of people have questioned it. Potential investors have said, hang on a minute, you're making a rod for your own back there. I don't believe we are, actually, but it's too complicated to get into in this short time we've got. But yes, it was a mixture of gut instinct and thinking it through. But I wanted to create a brand that I believed in. It's people do say this, I know, and sometimes they don't mean it. But to me, it wasn't about the money. I wanted to be successful and make money, of course. But I also wanted it to be something I could be proud of, which is a different measure.
So, Brand is Dead. You said there that you're still writing the book, still in production.
Yeah, well, it's in draft stage, and it doesn't have a publisher yet, but it's it's out with a couple of publishers. I won't say who they are, but it's out with a couple of publishers who've expressed an interest, and I'm sort of waiting to see what they say. One of the things I'm half expecting him to say is, "Yeah, we love the idea, but you've got to change that title," which and I'm prepared to negotiate around that because I believe it absolutely what I'm saying, but it needs qualifying in order for it to make sense. If you see what I mean.
Yeah, no, I do, and I think I like it because your last book you talked about here 18 months ago was Build the Brand in 30 Days, and now we're saying the brand is dead. It's like, oh, I like this.
And I wrote that book 10 years ago, so
really,
a lot has changed in that time.
Yeah,
in fact, everything has changed. That's my point.
Yes,
some of the fundamental principles remain true, but everything has changed.
Yes. Oh, well, I hope the publisher sticks with you.
Me too.
And well, actually, you haven't you took out the domain? You've got the URL for this, haven't you already?
Yeah, brandisdead.info, which is the sort of the platform on which I'm going to write about it and so on.
Right.
Although, frankly, going back to my earlier comments about laziness, I haven't written as much on there as I should do because I'm sort of pondering the content of the book itself rather than anything else. And suddenly people are asking me to go and speak about branding and things, which I haven't done for a couple of years. So it's nice to be back in doing that.
Yeah, well, listen, you're accountable now. We've just gave that domain name online, so you can't be lazy anymore.
Yeah, move along. There's nothing to see.
We've got people in Montenegro and Colombia wanting to read all about it. So listen,
well, I tell you where they should go. Really, what is more interesting is my other website, which is simply called simonadvises.com, which is my new personal website, and that's the way to access me, if you know what I mean. simonadvises.com. And it talks on there about the speaking and the mentoring and that sort of stuff, which is kind of how I spend my time as much now as anything.
So more of your consultancy sort of.
Yeah.
Good stuff. And you're on LinkedIn, so people could connect with you on LinkedIn.
Yes, I am.
And
yes,
I really didn't want to go there but listeners. Did he feel there was a nerve touch there? I think Simon might be getting people connecting with him, then going straight in for the right hook and trying to sell them something. So be nice, play nicely with them.
No, I'll tell you what the problem is with LinkedIn. I'm very happy to talk about it. I put a post on here a couple of weeks ago on LinkedIn about this, and I took it down because I was fed up with the flack I was getting.
Really?
Yeah. What I've noticed, and people might think I'm exaggerating. Maybe I'm a sensitive soul. The nasty, racist, sexist, homophobic, reactionary, far-right stuff that you kind of get used to and seeing on Twitter and to some extent on places like Facebook is creeping into LinkedIn. And I find that very, very disturbing. And I called a couple of people out on it.
Okay.
And I wrote a post about how I was blocking those people and that
I did see that.
And I got about, 30 responses, and about 25 of them were like, yeah, I agree with you. But a handful of them were like, don't be such a wuss. Why is everybody so paranoid? We're only speaking the truth, and I'm just kind of, it worries me. And I did a little bit of reading around it. And I don't want to, maybe it's not right to get into politics. I won't get into our own politics. But Donald Trump has, LinkedIn was a massive part. We're very well known this, but it was a huge part of Donald Trump's campaign, and is one of the ways in which the the right end of American politics talks to its audiences, because they're on LinkedIn. And that's fine. He's entitled to his views, and so are his supporters. And it's a free country. But what worries me is the rise of reactionary comments that go with it. It's one thing to think something, but it's another thing to start attacking people for all of those reasons that I mentioned, and that I find that very disturbing.
So, Simon, you're dropping the bombs today, mine, aren't you? Controvert. I tell you.
Yeah.
But I thought we'd get away without mentioning breakfast. Brexit. You pulled that pin. You threw the Trump one in. But
yeah, and the rise of the far right. So it's a cheerful way to end, isn't it?
Well, listen,
we have to acknowledge it. We have to accept we do not make businesses in a jolly, lovely world. We make businesses in a world that is fraught with challenges, and we have to watch out for those challenges and not get sucked in.
That's a good way to leave it. I like that.
Good.
Right. Let me just say, best wishes for the upcoming wedding.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
June, wasn't it?
June the 8th. I hope it's June the 8th. Yeah. I better just check. Yeah, I think. Don't want to be late, do I?
You don't?
No. Are
you honeymooning?
Hang on, I'm just checking it. Yeah, we are, but only in this country. We're going to. Yeah, it is the 8th. Thank God for that. We're going to the West Country, which I love in sort of late spring, early summer, and it'll be really, really nice.
Awesome. Well, I hope you have a wonderful time. If anybody wants to wish Simon congratulations on his wedding, you can get him at Simon or Middleton on Twitter.
That's right. Thank you very much indeed.
And you can push him on politics and everything else.
Yeah. Or actually, I don't go on Twitter quite so much now. LinkedIn is the place to find me, only because I can only spin so many plates, and I've kind of reined those in. And Twitter I find just to be in some ways quite an unpleasant environment.
Oh, he's off again. He's off again.
I'm off again. Okay. Sorry.
Right, Simon, I've had such fun, and maybe let's not leave it 18 months until
next time. Great. Okay, I'll be controversial about something else next time. But thank you very much, Ian.
Cheers, Simon.
All right, cheers.
Thanks to Simon there. I could have spoke forever. I feel so aligned with the way Simon thinks. I really enjoyed that. So as brands, I think we need to be different. Companies need to go the extra mile, remember our values, and of course, you know me, create some really killer content. And I'd love to know your thoughts on this week's show. Do you agree? How do you feel about the high street? Have you recently launched a brand? If so, let me know how it's going for you. Don't forget to click on your podcast player of choice and rate the show for me. Tell your friends about the show as well. I love to grow by word of mouth. So until next time, I'm Ian Farah. This is the Industry Angel. Thanks for listening.